Welcome back, everyone. We are live. This is Growing with My Fellow Growers, episode number 86. This is Jack Greenstock. As the host this evening, I'm joined by a panel of growers. And first, I'm going to introduce Spartan Grown.
Hello, everybody. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram and Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces. Or you can find me at usually most of my stuff is my homegrown. And then I also grow commercially with Mint Mechanico. So you can find them at Mint Mechanico on Instagram also.
Thank you for joining us, Spartan, and giving us the plugs. Next up, Dr. MJ.
Hey, thanks, Jack. I'm Dr. MJ Coco from Coco for Cannabis. And I want to tell everybody about the New Year's Grow Challenge. We finally got all the groups and everything set up for this. So head on over. It's time to sign up for the New Year's Grow Challenge at Coco for Cannabis or cocoforcannabis.com/challenge. I am looking forward to the show today as always, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Doc. Next up, Matthew Gates.
Hey everyone, this is Matthew Gates. I'm an integrated pest management specialist for those who don't know. And if you're dealing with pest problems, I have some information for you that you might like, a lot of educational content, and I'm also always open for consultation for those who need it in the agricultural sphere. You can find that information in 3 places, on Twitter and Instagram at SyncAngel, and also on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol. I actually just shared again my video about the cannabis aphid, since it's so prolific right now for so many people, and it's autumn time, so that's when a lot of aphids start to, if they do this sort of a thing in their life cycle, make eggs for the next season.
Good stuff to be aware of and look out for. So thank you for sharing that great knowledge as always. The last with us so far this evening is the American one.
Hey, Jack and panel and everyone in chat. I'm the American One on YouTube and the American One _with_Akeens on IG. If you search the American One and see a little guy with a top hat, American top hat, that's me. And yeah, good to be here.
Always happy to have you. For anyone listening who doesn't know, the American One will not be showing up. We can see him in our Zoom, but he is the voice in the background. You might hear him and not be able to see him on the screen. But that's all right. We always appreciate his feedback. The other thing I wanted to remind everyone is to do what I just did, which is click over to the live chat. That way you don't miss any of the messages, especially this evening. We don't have a particular topic picked out, so we're going to be leaning on the chat a lot to answer your questions. So with that being said, I just want to give a few shout outs. The first person I saw get here who's a regular is Sour Diesel Tangy. Has a purple thumb OG over there in the chat. Aldridge 25, TM, Dummy Grows, and a whole bunch of other great people. Just want to make sure to say thank you to all of them for showing up. It's always cool that we have a live crowd with us, and it's great to be able to interact with all of you. So thank you for showing up. If you do have questions, feel free to tag at Jack Greenstock. That's Jack space Greenstock, like with the little @ symbol, so it lights me up red. Or you could also tag at Cheap Home Grow. That'll make it appear orange, so that way I can find the questions and we'll be much more likely to answer them for you on the show. Otherwise, you can talk back and forth with the panel members in the chat, or you can @ them if you have something specifically you want to hear from them. And we'll do our best to make sure we go through and answer as much as we can. But before we go and start answering questions, because I haven't seen any yet, I was just curious if anybody's popped anything recently, seed-wise, anything that they're looking forward to.
I've done that. I've got 2 of them going. I've got your Velvet Punch F2s going. They're still in their 1 gals. I was trying to get them into their final containers this weekend, but it's not looking like I'm going to do that. So I'm waiting. The other ones that are behind them are Cuvée F1s from the late Subcool.
Did you pop those on his birthday? Or
Yeah,
I know
I
a lot of
did.
people did that. September 29th this year.
I've got 3 normal looking ones and 1 like really weird mutated looking one. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I'm excited, man. Those are the original pre-fire Cuvée or Cuvée, whatever. So I'm pretty excited to see what you find, because a lot of people rave about that. Subcool himself was a huge fan of that before he passed. So it's awesome that you got the original version and they actually sprouted, because I had some Chernobyl that I had issues with germination. Unfortunately, I got a Sangria that I just recently popped from Subcool and a few Jack the Ripper. So got some exciting stuff. Brandon Rust is about to join us here. I'm going to admit him to the Zoom call. I wanted to say with the Velvet Punch F2 my testers that I sent to you, I wouldn't worry too much about them being rushed on the transplant. If they get root bound, that's actually one of the things I tested for, both in the solo cups and in the 1 gallon pot. I root bound the shit out of a few of the plants and had no issues, no stress, no
Okay.
early sex showing or Hermes or anything like that. So that is
Yeah,
one of the things that I test for.
I'm running a full run of. It's just going to be four plants, and there's I don't know if they tend to be all female, I guess, but otherwise I'll have to find something else to throw them in there. But so because of that, I'm trying to, because they're still varying heights, the different phenos. I'm trying to keep them in their root to slow down the tall ones and try to let the shorter ones catch up.
Yeah, with F2s, I think sometimes there's a little bit of variance. I've been told
Yeah.
I'm growing. I just popped some myself along with the subcool stuff that I was talking about. Wanted to go ahead and introduce Brandon. It looks like you're on the road right now. Brandon, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm on my way home. I just thought I'd pop in. If you're not familiar with me, my name's Brandon Russ. I'm a cultivator. You can find me on Instagram at Russ Brandon. But keep on going, guys. I was just listening.
I just top dressed my berry lights from Kineos Genetics with some Bokashi Earthworks Bokashi. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the plants react. They've been really happy since I did it about half a week ago. I haven't seen that giant microbial bloom, but that might be because of my soil not having a top cover or anything like that. But that being said, the plants look super happy and it's smelling really good, like blueberry and pine, just like advertised. So that's always good stuff. The American one, have you popped anything recently that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I popped a whole bunch of different things that I'm looking forward to, and then there's some I'm still haven't gotten to yet. But I popped. Now it's been a while ago, but blueberry by Cheesequake that I made myself. I have about 20 of those, and I'm getting through section right now. So I have those just about to go into flower. Then I have a bunch of buttered cheese from AB Seed. That's their Instagram at A.B.C. That Smiley gifted me. Those are Platinum Dosey by Cheesequake. So I'm interested in seeing what they're like. Then I have some from, I have a Banana Kush from Pilgor. 420J, I think is his tag on IG. And I have a couple of blueberry seeds from Riot Seed Company that are going. And someone gave me Romulan by Blueberry in like 2018, and I popped a bunch of those that are in 1 gallons too right now. And I think that about covers it all. And then I have a whole lineup on deck that I'm going to do probably later tonight, get them wet at least, because I've been procrastinating and scared, but I think I got everything clean and I got some IPM that I could put in the soil, so I'm not as worried.
Brandon, I know your late dog, rest in peace, was named Romulan. Do you have any information about the Romulan that you could share? Did you grow it yourself personally a good amount? And what can you share about Romulan?
Yeah, I actually grew a lot of it. The reason why I named my dog after it is because it was one of my favorite varieties that I was cultivating at the time. That was 17 years ago when I was growing this stuff. It's funny that you bring up Romulan because I actually have blueberry Romulan crosses, bull rider Romulan crosses. And it's funny because I got into a little argument with somebody on the internet recently. And I was like, dude, Romulan is clone only. I mean, the real cut is a clone. It's probably 35 years old and it's still in my circle. This dude was like, why don't you tell Romulan Genetics that? And it's just like, well, just because somebody makes an S1 or does an IBL or outcrosses something, it doesn't make it that cut. You know what I mean? Because when we're talking about elite genetics, a lot of these things are clone only because they've already been hunted through and they've already been tried and true. And that's the reason these cuts are so desirable. So there is a Romulan cut. It's up in Oregon. It's still in my crew. I'm going to be growing it out here pretty soon at my new farm. It's a great variety.
Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
I was just going to say, even from that point, like, you can still get what are called soma-clonal variation. So even between clones, you can have discrepancies that develop over time. So you even have to control for that when you do research in labs and that sort of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, epigenetic changes happen when you move environments and you move different growth styles. And so, again, though, one of the reasons why people are, why they're these elite cuts that are so sought after is because they are, again, they're tried and true. They produce well, they have good highs, they grow well.
I was gonna copy and paste it into the Zoom chat, but I'll just fucking read it. That makes things a lot easier. I didn't want to cut you off, Brandon, but you finished talking there. So, Run to Your Fate says, at Cheap Home Grow, here's one. As far as foliar feeding goes, would it be more beneficial to have the VPD in the environment set up for the stomata to always be open?
Confused by the question because
Can you say that one more time?
Right?
isn't target VPD? Isn't that the point? If you're on target, the stomata are all the way up at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you wouldn't want to be like so hot and dry that the plant was in shutdown mode. It'll close off its stomata at that point.
Right.
But you wouldn't want the VPD to be so low that there was like no transpiration taking place. But so yeah, be in the correct range for VPD for foliar applications.
But that being said, don't be. As soon as you foliar, the humidity is going to be at 100%. So
yeah,
keep that in mind. Give it time to air out afterwards.
I've heard that the stomata are most open like 15 to an hour after 15 minutes to an hour after lights off. I'm not sure of the validity to that, but I've heard a few different people claim both, like 15 is the most open or an hour is the most open, but I think it would have to do with your environment, right?
After lights off is a tough time to foliar though, just because you're entering into the lights off period when it won't evaporate off. It won't, you're not having a lot of transpiration at that point. You're not having a lot of evaporation from the plant.
Yeah, I usually only ever foliar in veg, and I don't really mind the RH being a little bit higher in the night period because I keep the air flowing and circulation and also air exchange, a lot of air exchange. But I do agree that it's good to bring that up because I don't want people to go and spray their plants right after lights go out and end up with a bunch of molds and mildew.
To just be aware of that. It's generally recommended to foliar just before lights on rather than just like after, during lights off.
I was just bringing it up because uptake, for uptake point, like using the least amount of possible nutrient to get the most uptake in the plant, potentially.
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
So I haven't popped anything recently, but I do have a question. Can you tell me anything about Oreos and apple fritter varieties for cannabis? Have you heard of those two? The O's is OZ.
Oreos is from Michigan, so maybe Spartan Grown would have something to say about that. I think he may even have the cut, right? Or somebody else in Michigan I know just got the cut recently.
But I know people. I think.
Oh no, you're good now.
Oh, I don't have the cut, but I know people that do. I haven't had it yet, so I don't have anything. I haven't tried it. I don't know.
To be honest, Matthew, be brutally honest, I would just Google it and I would try and search down the good information for you if I wanted to do that. And I can't really do that well on the air. But any new cultivar that came out within the last 3 years, the chances of me actually knowing the lineage are like much, much lower because most of my genetic lineage research and passion lies in the stuff from like 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and even like 2010 to 2015. Anything 2015 to 2020, I'm just much less familiar with. I think apple fritter, I would be guessing, but I think it's from Alien Genetics. Well, they moved away from the Fruity Pebbles and they started using sour apple IBL, and I think it's one of their apple fritter is one of their crosses with the sour apple IBL, but I could be mistaken. That's my best guess right now. The chat hopefully will correct me. Smiley asks, let's talk about purple stems under LEDs. Joshua Steensland mentioned this in a video earlier in the week for the reference and the question. So what he's talking about is a lot of people will maybe move their plants from T5s or HPS or some other lighting method into an LED setup, and then they notice that their plants have purple stemming. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I heard Smiley pontificating that it could be due to so many more photons from the LED that it almost has to go through like a hardening off period like you would when you take a plant from indoors to the outdoors. And I thought that was an interesting theory, but I've also would wonder about the nutrients in the root zone, whether it's hydroponic or soil. If everything is kept ideally, I would argue that maybe there shouldn't be a purple stemming. Maybe there's a deficiency in magnesium or something else. that's
I don't
causing that
know.
purple stemming.
Yeah.
I've experienced it, and it was drastic, and it had nothing to do with the infrared that Joshua Stiesland was talking about, because the LED I had didn't have it, and it actually was under lower lighting than like it should have been. Like,
Yeah, I agree with you that it's not just about density of photons.
The spectrum matters, I
If
think.
there is a phenomena there, and certainly there's a lot of sort of anecdotal evidence of things like this. I don't know of any sort of science that looks into this specifically, but I think it would be more related to a plant reaction to the shift in spectrum potentially than it would be to or maybe the combination of that with density. But just thinking that there's like so many more photons, I mean, that if you're running the CFLs appropriately close enough, you're getting the same densities or at least comparable to what the plant should need at that stage of growth.
I agree with that. I think one of the things Steensland talked about was like how red maybe drives photosynthesis more. I think like when people look at the McCree curve, they think that red and blue, going back to the whole blurple theory, drive photosynthesis at a higher rate or something of that nature. This isn't my beliefs. This is just what I've heard, and maybe that's what they're alluding to with this question.
That's that's
I
really
don't
more
buy
marketing
it.
from. I mean, there's some truth to the variance in sort of how the different wavelengths within PAR affect photosynthesis. But the real thing about the blurple lights was the LED chips were cheaper and more efficient at those wavelengths than they were at other wavelengths. So the early generation chips were simply easier to get in sort of high efficiency with red and blue wavelengths.
What was the McCree curve showing though? With it's like I've seen it a million times showing like the blue has got a big spike and then it drops in the greens and then it goes in another big spike at the red. So everybody thought, not everybody, but a lot of people took that to mean that the most absorption is happening from those. And I've even heard people say green plants don't take up green light, but now a lot of people growing with like 3500K, like white light, notice that it has great benefit and it grows the plant just well, and green actually penetrates really well.
Yes,
So
exactly. Some of the light's reflected, more of the green light is reflected than other light, but it still uses some of the green light for sure. And plants have been shown to do better under that full spectrum of light. Yeah, there are differences to how the different wavelengths of light react to it, but it's not nearly as sort of bimodal as the blurples made it out to be. And plants really do better with a full spectrum.
yeah, I think it definitely comes down to like a lot of times I see that it's people that are switching to LED for the first time, or they're just adjusting to LED. Like maybe they're still running the room at 75 degrees because they ran HPS and they thought that was the perfect temperature. And now they can run it at like 82 and get really great results, but they maybe are cranking their AC and keeping it at 75. Like I've seen people literally keep their LED room at 75 until somebody steps in and says, hey, try running it a little bit warmer and see if that helps.
I think I think it's a lot of combination of everything, but I do definitely believe that LED, because now, so I had it under an LED light, and then when it got cooler, I put on the HPS light, and it's starting to where it was all purple, it's starting to green up actually. Even the older parts are green, getting green.
It's really not a very uncommon sort of reaction in plants under certain kinds of stressors. I mean, it happens when plants get too cold too. And so I think we may be trying to overdiagnose the purple stems. I think it's just sort of the plant's reaction to it. I have not heard sort of discussion that this purple stem, the petiole there is really connected to like other plant health issues or growth or performance or anything like that. It seems to be simply a sort of on the side observation of something that happens.
I guess I would say
It's something with the light, only because this is how my mind kind of worked it out, is that because I'm in the unique situation to where I'm growing under LED lights both in a commercial setting and in a home setting, in organic and in synthetic. I can see it in the synthetic setting as well as the organic setting. So to me, that means that it isn't a lack of nutrient, because in a synthetic setting, you can feed them everything you need. You know what I mean? It's immediately available. It's not unless you're doing something out of the ordinary and you've got a weird imbalance of nutrient. So I don't think it's a nutrient uptake thing. I think it's got to do with light, because that's the only change. It's the only thing that's different.
I think it could be both, which is sort of a cop-out answer, but
It's most likely both, to be honest. If we
Uh,
really consider like all factors impact the plant in every single cultivation situation, right?
yeah, I suppose. And then also, less cowardly, I could say at least this much that I do feel that like it could just like for some cases like it'd be a genetic expression thing. Like some plants might just do it kind of in sort of an insensitive way, like a light insensitive or whatever that factor might be or factors might be, very well could just like happen no matter what.
Like
Kind
I
of
have
an
all
autoflower will flower no matter how much dark periods it gets.
Yeah, but in this case, we're talking about cultivars that didn't do it under HPS, and they now are exhibiting it under LED.
Yeah, so then that would be one of those factors, I suppose.
but like even under the same light, sometimes like I'll have certain plants, and this isn't like red stemming, but they'll fade completely to purple. And then I have a plant that's completely green in the same exact room under the same exact lighting. So it does come down to genetics in that regard. But I would say if I see 100 Instagram growers that I follow, 90 out of 100 that have purple plants, I would guess are growing with LED. And I've just noticed that as a trend. Before I got LED, I was like, holy shit, how are all these fucking LED growers getting these beautiful ass purple fades on their plants? Like that was one of the things that I was like really hoping for when I switched to LED. And granted, it is a lot genetic, but I do think it's a little maybe easier to achieve a purple fade as far as like the finished flower product. Not I'm transitioning from the whole stem now into like the leaf fade and even on the buds. But I do see people like Noah the Grower, who's not with us this week, but he grows really dark, like purple, deep green plants under HPS still. So there's a ton of factors that go into the color expression, no doubt.
I was reading recently actually that irises, like the flower, apparently the basal color, what's thought to be the sort of like the first color of iris flowers is like an anthocyanin based sort of violet purple color. So and a lot of plants do express anthocyanin. So I think that it's maybe more likely to have a couple of different uh, expression factors, I suppose. But that could just be, my bias towards knowing a little bit about that color category in plants versus other ones.
For example, anti-cyan, and I think Steven Reisner was saying that molybdenum, MB, is the one that
Molybdenum.
that can help to. That's what the plant needs to produce that. So, and he feels that most nutrient lines are lower in that to try to be safe because you can easily overdo it. So he likes to add a little bit.
So I'm sharing my screen because last week I brought up these fruit, I guess it is, this new thing that I tried recently, the finger lime, the lime australiaceae or whatever it is technically. But if you guys can all see this, it's another anthocyanin thing because the ones I was initially getting were all sort of this clear color on the inside. But then if you look at these photos, there are a few different varieties. They also call them like caviar limes because if you could see the lime when you cut it open has these sort of like little caviar type bubbles, but I believe the pH and even the genetics can change the level of anthocyanin and the color production. Like in blueberries, that's anthocyanin, but it's believe it's more acidic pH. And then with like blackberries, it's also anthocyanin, but purple and cannabis is anthocyanin. So like all these different things are anthocyanin, but it's expressing differently through different pH ranges. And I just wanted to show these off because like I said, I finally had one that changed from that green color over here on the left to the more red color. And it was anthocyanin based, but I wouldn't have expected it because it still had a green rind. So just sort of a random little off topic.
How do you eat it? You cut it in half and like spoon it out, or how do you eat that thing?
Yeah, you squeeze it and it like kind of pops out. I just put it on my palm and pop it in my mouth straight up by itself. But I think my wife said she would love to if she was still a mixologist. She used to do like competition mixology. And she said she wished she knew about those back in the day because they have a really nice texture and a ton of flavor and it like explodes in your mouth, which is like that's what she said kind of thing to say. But it would be really interesting for like a mixology, like a cocktail, if you could drink something and then as it's in your mouth, like it explodes and then another flavor hits you. So
try topping your next tapping your next salad with that would be pretty awesome too.
Definitely a good idea. I need to eat more salad, to be perfectly honest. I don't eat enough. That's for sure. Cannabis salad is what I usually have off my rolling tray in the morning.
You and me both, man. You and me both. I've got one going right now.
That's exactly what always happens to me. It's like I've got one or two strains, and then they like kind of all get pushed together, and I'm like, what is this again? Whatever. I'll smoke it. It'll get me where I need to go. Trying to get back over to the chat on YouTube. I maximized my screen, and I lost all you guys.
Talking about lights a lot. Let's see.
Oh, I have a question. I sent to the Zoom chat. Brandon Russ is going to rejoin us. It looked like maybe he dropped out or lost the call. But Sour Diesel Tangy, shout out to him. He was the first one here in the chat that I saw. Says, at Cheap Home Grow, what recommended EC and pH in cocoa during flower? And I want to pass that to Doc because I know whenever somebody asks me that, I always go to your website and screenshot the little like how to like, set EC targets in cocoa. And if I believe from what I remember, it's like 1.1 to 1.5, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I try to keep the runoff below 1.5 in my grow. So the inflow, if the inflow to runoff sort of is going really well, I can get inflow, or I'll be willing to get inflow up to like 1.3-ish or 1.3 something, or 1300 really something. Which is the same thing. We're just talking microsiemens or millisiemens there. But above 1500, you're not really doing yourselves much favors in cocoa. It depends on the frequency of your fertigation too, but a decent fertigation frequency, if you're keeping the root zone EC at 1500 or below, you can provide more than enough of everything that they need to grow big fat flowers, that's for sure. Going above that, you're more likely to start provoking problems, especially with calcium uptake, especially in flowering with a high dose of potassium and phosphorus in the water. What happens there when you try to push EC is even more than the EC itself, you start running into problems with calcium uptake. So staying below 1500 on the runoff is a good idea. With the pH, I try not to let the pH get too dialed into anything. I sort of prefer a little bit lower. But I prefer lower because I run an automatic watering system and the pH always drifts up. You don't want to just get locked in on a pH. I let the pH run anywhere from 5.7 up to 6.2, 6.3, even in the res when it starts to spike.
Good information. I just wanted to share the actual screen of me on the link that I use so frequently for new growers in my DMs growing in cocoa or any hydroponic medium.
Cool. That's it.
Honestly, it's fixed. I have stopped counting, but at least 100 different growers have come to me with issues, and I just send them this and get into that range. Spartan, you're unmuted. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'll just say, if anybody has issues or questions about fertigating or growing in that style, or really anything with hydroponic nutrients, we got a lot of articles on that stuff and how it works and sort of how the science behind it. So I'm glad you found that helpful, Jack. That's so there's an article I think that Jack's referencing that allows growers to sort of dial in EC targets more specifically to your strain, to your grow climate, to your starting water, even to make slight adjustments in what your overall target should be.
The seedling one is really good too. That is the other, my second most referenced guide is I'm starting a seedling in cocoa. What the fuck do I do? And I'm here, this is the guide.
It's one of the toughest stages to get through. Yeah, absolutely. And I hope I've got a lot of happy growers through seedlings with that article. So I hope it's useful for everybody. Lots of pictures, and I do a couple of different day-by-day timelines there as well, sort of what I do every single day through the seedling stage.
I messed it up my first time when I was growing in cocoa. I had a mentor who showed me everything, but I wasn't really being monitored at that point, so I just popped some seeds, and the very first time I popped seeds in cocoa, they were unhappy for the first few weeks, and finally I got it dialed back in, and they grew crazy the rest of the time. But I always look back at that, I'm like, man, if only I didn't fuck up that first couple of weeks. I wonder how much more vigorous they could have been or healthier. But they do definitely, once you get them back on track, they seem to grow amazingly. So
yeah, you can recover from disasters. I mean, I like somebody told me once that when you apply to grad school, they don't check your junior high transcript. And there's some truth to that. Like the plants can recover. I mean, there's certain things that can happen that can really stunt them and set them back permanently, but you can also grow through a lot of little setbacks.
I want to.
Since we were talking
We're
about
talking about purple stems because maybe some people, maybe I'm confused, but I think people are thinking purple petioles instead of purple stems, just following chat. Whereas, those are two different things. Purple stems is the actual,
Stalk of the plant.
Yeah, I was thinking petioles. I even said that.
Okay. Yeah. And then, another thing I wanted to put out there is one thing that I have observed is when you have plants that will turn those I'm not talking stems, the petioles, start turning that purple, you can actually see underneath is green. It's like, that's what makes me think it's light connected, because it's like the light is hitting the top part of the petiole and not the underside of the petiole. And I'm seeing purple on the top before I see it on the bottom.
I have the exact opposite right now. So my top is green, and you flip it over, and the bottom of the leaf, the stem is purple.
Are you doing side lighting, Jack?
No.
You're not?
I've never seen that.
I was referring to the stems, the actual stems, stalk stems.
Stalk is a better term, because stem is an
turn-
appropriate term for a leaf. A leaf has a
But
stem.
not a
it's
petiole. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you're
better
right.
term.
But it definitely turned that. It wasn't like purple. It was like that light purple.
Like red
It was
purple.
bizarre. Yeah, red purple. It was bizarre. And then when I turned the HPS back on, it totally started to fade away and turn green again.
I think this might be due to different. I think plants uptake nutrients under different wavelengths, because I think these different wavelengths are causing different hormonal changes within the plant tissue. And one of the things, though, if we're talking purple stems on plants, I can almost say probably about 98% of the time it's because your plant has potassium deficiency. Because I a lot of times, I've gotten stuff from people that were like, oh, this is a purple, like the stems will stay purple, there's nothing you can do. And as soon as it goes into my system, things completely green. And the only time I ever see purpling stems is because there is a potassium deficiency, and I can pretty much correlate this also with current testing. So that's one of the
you've switched to stems now, right? You're talking about the stalks and stems, not the petiole.
Not talking about what the petiole is. I see that in genetics a lot, because I have a lot of varieties that are not purple varieties, but they do express this. And this is across the board. This isn't anything that has changed with environmental factors or anything that's changed with different nutrient regimens or growth styles.
I agree with you about the potassium, and that's what brought me back to the subject, because shout out to GMO in chat. He was talking about, he thought it was a potassium deficiency, and that's when I thought, well, he must be thinking stalks and not petioles. So that's why I just wanted to clear up what we're really even talking about there.
And yeah, I bet you that the LED probably makes it easier for the plant to use up the potassium, or something's happening with that light spectrum that's causing it, though, too, as well.
So I can tell you from experience, under LEDs, my plants eat way more potassium. It's insane, even just from switching from CMH. But I am adding so much potassium. It's incredible.
So that's probably exactly what was going on with the plant that I was playing with.
I think most people are probably putting just more light on their plant with their LEDs than what they're used to with an HPS. So the whole plant's metabolism is increased, and it's going to be eating up a lot of everything.
Al said, though, when he even dropped the amount of PPFD, he still had that issue. And one thing I wanted to say is I've done personal research, because I built my LED that I strapped on to I bought a light, and then I DIY'd a fixture on top of it, which has 440 nanometer blue spectrum, which is fairly close to UVA, or the UV spectrum is like in the 300s and 200s. But from the research I've done, 440 nanometer blue can increase anthocyanin production across all plants, from lettuce, kales to cannabis. And it also has been shown to increase terpene production. That was the reason that I included it in my light. And I've noticed if I run the light by itself, just 3,500 Kelvin, I get less purple than if I run the light with the 440 boost. So, and I also noticed when I flowered under my 4,000 Kelvin, my veg light, HLG 65, that my plants were the same exact cut under both lights. The 3,500K was less purple than the 4,000K. So the bluer the spectrum, the more purple showed
Were
up
they
in my plant.
equal amounts of output as far as light in general?
Yeah, like 800 to 1,000 ppft.
Because when you add in a supplemental light, wouldn't that be adding more light? Or are you dialing down the other light to match?
I have a dimmer for my 3,500K. It's a 2 cob array, and it goes from 20 watts to 220 watts. And then the thing that I strapped on is like a 3 11-watt rings. 2 of them are 660 nanometer red, but the other one in the middle is a 440 nanometer blue. So even just that little amount, I was shocked, because the guy who made it's like, I was trying to get more of the blue in my spectrum, but he's like, you don't need it. And I was kind of a little bit worried, but I think it's more of a triggering an effect thing, kind of like the 730 nanometer red, where I have the rapid LED little puck. It's like 4 tiniest diodes you've ever seen. I think it only runs 7 watts or something, but it triggers an effect. It can do both the Emerson effect and the putting your plants to sleep by triggering the phytochrome 1 or 2.
So was it running the whole time, or you're only doing like
both?
Bursts?
Whole time with 660 for Emerson, so you get better photosynthesis, and at the end to put them to sleep faster.
I see.
You know, fun fact, insects, well, at least most of them are bichromats. So they usually perceive like green, yellow, and like blue ultraviolet. But for the ones I'm talking about, for a lot of them anyways, they can't actually distinguish between mixtures of those two wavelengths. But like honeybees and some butterflies and beetles can see a larger spectrum. They can see reds, I think, as well, if I remember correctly.
They can. I know from flower tracking. I've seen like they painted the restaurant my wife used to work at orange, and that difference from like it used to be blue. They started having bees all fucking summer long. They were just flying into the restaurant because they painted the whole sidewall orange, and that's a shade of red, I believe. But
Yeah.
I know that they have the ability to discriminate between that color, and it attracts them to it, because it's, if you think about a lot of flowers in nature, there's reds and oranges and yellows and things that I think bees would have to be able to track down, maybe, or discriminate.
It's actually that's true, but this is the human bias, because the ultraviolet nectar guide, well, people call them floral guides now, but because there's other things besides nectar that insects might be looking for from flowers, like pollen or resins or extrafloral nectaries or something. But ultraviolet, or like spots on the flowers that are visible in the ultraviolet spectrum, when the bees or some other insect views them, they're almost like, they're very attractive. You know, they have a specific receptor, or they can specifically see like bee purple is what it's called, and it's kind of like this sort of like a combination of what was it? Of those two different spectra, like the very low or high spectra, like that kind of like yellow green, and like the ultraviolet. So they can see, they have a receptor that doesn't come on, and so they can see the difference between those two. If that makes sense. I don't think I articulated that very well. But it's interesting to me to consider the possibility that certain lights might have IPM sort of implications, and that like using certain lights might attract them or repel them.
Well, in that case, you were mentioning that they couldn't really discriminate between like a blue and a UV in some cases. So is there a possibility or a chance that you could use a blue spectrum light that would be good for your plant, but the bug would maybe be impacted like a UV spectrum? Maybe that's a little bit wishful thinking.
Sorry, I meant that like green, yellow, and like blue ultraviolet, kind of like those two sort of, you know, there's like a gradient, like different species might be a little bit more or less sensitive to one, or like different shades and that sort of a thing. There's also this like difference between like what's called like true vision color and like wavelength, I think mediated behavior it's called, something like that. So like sometimes it's dependent on like the intensity of the light, and like some insects are responsive to this or not, or like colors, like with the context of the color on a different background with a different color can like really matter as well. So like the fact that it's like a red or an orange or like a yellow or a green on the background of more green or on the background of a different color can also influence their ability to kind of perceive it. But you're right. Like for example, I think, well, like for like so like they're attracted to ultraviolet. So you can kind of, I think there are some horsefly traps that make use of this. So they like shine ultraviolet light on to like the surface of water, and so it becomes super attractive. It's like a big flower or like a big something or other, and they go and they dive bomb it and then they die. So like you can have that.
Sungrown707 in chat mentioned on fucking talking shit with Eagle. He uses, I think he called it a Dyna trap, and I believe it was like a UV or some spectrum with like a fan, and it attracted the bugs. He was saying he doesn't have caterpillar problems because he attracts the moths and butterflies with this. I think he called it a Dyna trap. He could correct me, he's in the chat right now, but it was some sort of light with a fan, and instead of like zapping them or killing them, it just like sucked them in and trapped them in this little thing, and they ended up dying that way.
Yeah, I think I'm familiar with that trap, if that's the description that it has. And
So
yeah, there's
I wanted to just bring this visible light spectrum up as a reference because, as I was talking about earlier, these numbers on the bottom are nanometers, and you see violet over here is 400. We got ultraviolet is 300, and I was talking about 440, which is in that far blue range. But as Matthew was talking about, you got your like blues to ultraviolets over here, and you've got your green to yellow. A lot of people, I think, could benefit just from like looking at these, because when we talk about like 730 nanometer, that's just outside that red range, and then we got the 660 in this area. But I think it's helpful to have a visual reference because we are a YouTube show. People are actually able to watch this. Sorry to the podcast listeners, you can check out the YouTube if you're listening and you want to go back and listen to this portion and reference what we're looking at. I just Googled electromagnetic spectrum light, and you can find a whole bunch of different things that list out the actual nanometers to go along with the spectrums we're referencing.
And vision is such a really important aspect of insect evolution, because like I love to talk about, insects are the first animals to get powered flight, and so being able to see well is pretty conducive to flying well as well. And I have a video on my YouTube channel that goes over two-spot spider mite, Tetranechus urticae, and I do mention that there is a phototaxy for red, green, and I think ultraviolet or violet, sort of like that kind of wavelength level. I think they were positive towards the red. I think weirdly enough, it was like there was some sort of like repulsion for green, which was be surprising because foliage is green. So I might be misquoting my own video there, but you should check it out. I think that's like kind of an aspect of IPM where it's like, it might be a little bit comical, but like if you can think and know how the pest operates and like perceives its world, you might be able to be really clever. Like with traps, for example, and that kind of a thing. Or with aromas too, you can kind of hit various levels of their physiology and kind of be like, this is attractive and the light's attractive, so it's aromatic, it's visual, that kind of a thing. And you might have a more effective means of like disrupting or directing them, or beneficial for that matter. I know a company that was using green light to keep a parasitic wasp more active, I think during winter in poinsettia crops, and it worked really well because the green light didn't really affect the crops either. So you could basically and it would attract them. So you just put the green light where the pest, I think it was whitefly, I think it was a whitefly parasitoid, where the whiteflies were, and they would just all hang out around there. So that's kind of a cool way to sort of amp up your IPM game, I feel like.
That is a great way to do it, and I just wanted to confirm Sungrown707 did say Dynatrap was the name, and they said a lot of people in their area are dealing with a lot more caterpillars than they are. They said they have some here and there, but for the most part, that trap taking out the butterflies and moths prevents the caterpillars from landing on your plants and then laying, the egg for the caterpillar to come eat your plant. So it's working really well for him. He's an outdoor grower. You should check him out in Northern California. Follow Sungrown707. He's a cool dude. He had a episode of fucking talking shit with Eagle recently. Just really genuine guy. So shout out to him in the chat. Always cool to see familiar faces in the cannabis community popping into our show. So thank you to him for joining and sharing that information, because it was, I think, very pertinent to this specific topic, using light to activate your IPM without having to necessarily spray anything. I mean, that's awesome. You don't have to get your BTK out then. If you could kind of hang up a few of those, or you can combine the two of them and be doubly effective, I guess.
Yeah, I've seen even commercial settings.
You're super quiet, Spartan. I don't know what just your like volume dropped to like nothing.
I'm gonna have to get a new microphone. I guess I'm having issues. Is it any better? No. Is my mic any better now?
It's still coming through really, really, really quiet.
I got it maxed out to the
Oh,
max.
there we go. There we go. It just like clicked back up.
All right, I had to turn the automatic. They had the box checked for automatic mic adjust, so I just put it all the way up and left it.
Yeah, that happens with Smiley on Eagle Show sometimes too. So I'm glad that we've got it figured out, because I can hear you like night and day now, way, way better.
Okay, thank you. What the heck were we just talking? Oh, in a commercial setting, you can use that ultraviolet light. They've got them for, I mean, look in the food industry even. It's just a little small ultraviolet light that sits in a plastic box on the wall or a metal box on the wall, and behind the light is a sticky trap. So the bugs will fly. They'll be attracted to the light, and they get stuck to the sticky trap.
My wife, my wife's mother, or my mother-in-law, I should say, has those in her house. She has a bunch of dogs, so she just has it like plugged into the wall, and they work super effectively. So I've definitely seen it in several settings be very effective. Sorry, Matthew, to cut you off.
Oh no, I just wanted to. No, I just said absolutely. I was agreeing with Spartan, but I did do the due diligence of going to the video. It's called Tetranicus urticae, Physiology and General Knowledge. I talk about a bunch of other things, but the diagram I have here is phototaxy is at 375 nanometers, photokinesis is at 525 nanometers, and repellency was documented at 700 nanometers. So 700 is red. 375 is violet, and 525 is like a greenish color.
Thank you for confirming that information. It's always nice to know the actual wavelengths and how they impact different things, especially spider mites. That's one of the videos of yours I've actually referenced a handful of times, because a lot of people deal with those. And so for identification and you know, just general information, you give a ton of great detail. For anybody who doesn't know, in the pest primer videos, I think that's what you're referring to, but it might not be in this case. But I've watched your pest primer for the spider mite. I won't try to say the Latin name and butcher it, but I think it's very helpful that you give like what they're maybe resistant to. You give the things that you can spray, and you also give the predators that can deal with them. So you learn a lot about the insect and also how to combat it. So definitely check out Zenthanol's YouTube if you haven't already. I also want to take this time to say we've got 100 and we had 133. It just went down to 129, but make sure to hit that thumbs up. We've only got 37 thumbs up so far in the chat. I know we've got 100 more than that here. So definitely show us some love and appreciation. It makes sure that we can get the show out to as many people as possible, and make sure we keep coming back and doing this every week. Gives us a little bit of motivation. You know, we realize there's actually people out there listening and chatting it up, and we're making a difference and helping. Otherwise, we just hang out and bullshit with each other like we did the one week that we weren't able to go live. So good times with this crew always.
I want to say one more thing. So I realized that I used jargon, and actually, if you guys want, if you haven't seen the video, the last video we talked about things that are really cool, like epistemology and linguistics, and whether you're a prescriptivist or a descriptivist, and what you think about words and all that sort of thing. Dr. MJ Coco had a lot of cool things to say about that. But when I say
Descriptive grammar, woo!
Ooh, yes, grammar. I mean, come on, that's what you come here for, right? So from my
Yes, I think so.
so at least I do. From my description previously, phototaxy, that sort of 375 nanometers, that's sort of a violet color. That's like they sort of are positively directed towards moving towards, you know, that sort of that color spectrum. Repellency was self-explanatory. That was 700 nanometers. That's a red color, a deep brick red color.
The farthest red before you get into deep red. 700 is the actual cutoff before you get into far red.
Oh, okay, there you go. And so it's kind of, and so I want to bring up that that's significant, I think, because these are kind of on opposite visual spectra, at least for humans, anyways. Um, and then photokinesis is when something like activity is sort of stimulated, that sort of causes them to move around. And of course, that's that 525 sort of green color like foliage. So just so that people understand what those words mean and if they want to do anything about that, I suppose. Don't paint your greenhouse green, for example. Maybe
Good advice, and
red,
thank you for clarifying.
but probably not red. Actually, don't do that.
Isn't that false advertising calling it a greenhouse if you can't paint it green?
Probably, right? maybe
They
and
do
then
have green greenhouses. They're really like shitty cheap ones. They're not really like even a poly. Like it's like you could see through it. It's like a little grid.
Who knows?
Yeah, I've seen them. And not to hate on anybody who uses them, they're effective. Mythbusters actually used those greenhouses when they did the "Does Music Impact Plant" study, and they found that like rock and roll, I think, it ended up being like the best plants, but their watering system ended up fucking up and like killing off half their plants. So it wasn't a really good true experiment. But the one thing I thought was funny about that episode, because I went back and rewatched it because we talked about this a few weeks ago, the music and plants thing, and Mythbusters called like the local police because they're like, "Hey, we're setting up like 8 or 10 greenhouses on this roof, and we really just want you to know we're not growing pot. Like, please don't raid us. Like, we're just doing a science experiment for Mythbusters." And they had those little, I'd say entry level greenhouses that are like a plastic almost. It's like, I don't know. Not a big fan of those, but there's lots of options out there that I think are also affordable and will work a little bit better for most people. The American one over there, you've been quiet. Speaking of music and your plants, have you tried anything recently? I know you're in the philosophy of if it's not hurting them, why not try?
I heard he sings poetry to the plants in the
No, but I got a ton of those crystals, and I'm starting to put those into the soil. And with all that redox talk, if crystals are emanating electricity, even if it's millivolts, it might be helping. So other than that, nothing special.
I wonder. I got my one lithium quartz plant that I claimed like the few episodes back that like 2 rows in a row, the best plant had the crystal. But then this time I got all 3 plants now have a crystal, but I added 2 kind of like later. And the one that had it from the very beginning is, like I said earlier, it's like the healthiest, best one. But I haven't noticed like any major change or improvement since adding the other 2 to the plants that didn't have it from the get go. So hopefully we'll see improvement if I have them there all around in the future. But I'll keep reporting honest feedback because, like I said, I don't want to just like be convinced and like, oh, woo, woo, but I think there is the power of positivity, and there's like the placebo effect is one of the most real effects. Sometimes it's more effective than most medications, unfortunately. So I think it's sometimes if you believe you can achieve, even if it's not like backed by science, and being positive in your garden, I think will go a long way, no matter what you have to do to go about that positivity. If it's crystals or singing to your plants, my good buddy Doja DNA, who is, in my opinion, one of the best breeders. He's the best gear I've ever grown came out of his garden, and he would sing to his plants in his greenhouse all the fucking time. And he was like super passionate, just loved it. But I think it was more than just the singing to the plants that made his genetics amazing. It was like the decade worth of love and passion that he put in on the hill.
Yeah, I think it's anecdotal, of course, but I think that's what's behind the whole farmer's shadow thing. You know what I mean? What's the most important thing in your garden? A farmer's shadow, or I've heard it told a lot of times, like, what's the best nutrient? Farmer's shadow. What they're saying is you got to be there to tend to your plants, and I think there's something in all of us where when I think humans are kind of put on this planet to care for things, whether you find that we have to have pets or we have to have plants. They're all living things, and there's something inbred in us, or whatever, where we're like nurturers, and you get that energy back in tenfold, I think, that you put into it through the plants. And I don't know, I can't put my finger on it. I can't say. There's all these studies where, um, the study where people were, this is the bad plant, so you yell bad things at this plant. This is the good plant, so you say positive things to this plant. And the positive plants did well, and the negative did bad. And, there's countless of these examples, and I think it's got a lot to do with just, you could call it energy or whatever, but you can't go into a grow with a really bad attitude and expect good results. I'm not saying it's impossible to have okay results, but you're not going to have great results. And we even take that into work at a commercial site. We've unfortunately had to fire an employee because the employee just got really bad attitude and kept it for months on end. It was affecting everyone, and that affects the plants, and that's the bottom. I mean, that affects the bottom line. So I don't know. We can't explain it, but we observe it, and
I think some of that goes to something that is observable, which is, oh shit, my connection's unstable. Can you hear me?
yeah, you sound fine.
Okay. But every single successful group that I've seen scale up, whether it's a 2,000 square foot cultivation or larger, whatever it is, the people that I've seen doing really well, they always credit their success to their team. I've heard Brandon say it at Majestic. I've heard you and your crew say it at Mitten Canico. I just heard the Cannabis Brothers, Payaso Grow on Future Cannabis Project. They're like one of the top 5 out of 100 samples I tried in the California legal market. They credit their team, just like, but not only do they do that, it was like their whole entire interview, they just keep going back to like, we have a really fucking good team. Like our team loves it. They're all bought in. Everybody, they're there. They're doing what they love. Like our sisters are taking care of the paperwork so we can be the growers because we love growing. We don't want to do the paperwork. They're taking care of metric. We're doing the growing. And it's like, if you get that right team and you get everybody doing the things that they're good at and what they love, it just makes sense that you're going to be more successful, because people that hate what they do aren't going to put in the same level of attention, and they might not be as precise about measuring off certain things. And I really do think it comes down to that team atmosphere. If you want to have a larger scale grow, be successful, I think you have to have like not only just a team, but like a happy team. Shout out to Miss Nudie Grows. She was at a commercial grow in Canada that she wasn't happy, and most people there were hating it. So she left. She's at a smaller grow now, and all the people are bought in, and it just makes a difference to go to work and not feel like you're working, feel like you're just following your passion and loving your job.
Yeah, and there's nothing. I mean, there's. I'll put it this way. Matt told me a story. Michigan Matt on Instagram. Go follow that guy. But so he told me that when he started this, before they even started Mechanico, and before he agreed to come on, he was in Colorado and he was touring all these grows, all these ones that had the big names. You know what I mean? The big successful grows. And he said there was one thing that he saw in every single one that was common. He said they were all very different, but the one common thing was they all had great teams. It was the team that was everything, and that's what's so hard to duplicate on the commercial scale. With we were lucky enough to the owner Steven Mitten Gardens, and then the COO Matt, and then myself. We're all come out of the caregiver market. We were all caregivers before this. We were all growing for years and years before this, growing this plant and for medicine. You know what I mean? So we had that mindset already. We're already all have that same mindset. So it really helps when everybody's kind of on the same page, and it really makes the team flow way easier to. So if you're starting a business or you're looking to get into a business, try to match the same ideals with the people you're working for. So when I approached it like I was interviewing them. I wanted to know everything about how they felt about this, that, and the other thing. And when I was satisfied that they saw the same, they were the same kind of grower as myself, then I jumped on board. Don't jump on board of that team that, like you said, they're just arguing back and forth. And if you don't gel with them from the get-go, don't waste anybody's time. Don't waste their time and don't waste your own time.
The whole stereotype right now is there's like Chads and Brads, or these big investors that come in and throw millions and millions of dollars at a facility, and they hire like one master grower who knows if they're qualified or not, but then they hire a bunch of other people at minimum wage, and then those people are like slave laborers, and then the master grower is like getting all the credit if they do successfully, or if they fuck up, he gets fired and they bring somebody else in, they try and redo things. But I wanted to ask Brandon, because you've recently built a team, and I know you're probably constantly acquiring new people over there at Majestic and your farm that you're building out. What did you is there any tips or tricks that you could say, like, how did you form a successful team? Like, how did you gather those people that really love it and want to be there? Because so many people just want a paycheck, and even if it's cannabis, at a certain point it becomes a job for these people, and they just are going to work, clocking in, working, and then clocking out. So how do you avoid that sort of like burnout atmosphere, and what do you look for when you're recruiting a good team?
Well, let me start off by saying this. I fucking hustled when I got out here. I was working 12, 14, 16-hour days for like 3 months straight, right? Because there was just me and one other dude running the whole place. Nick is one of the owner's sons. He came on and did the build out. He was with the last cultivator, and he was just like, he doesn't, he's not from cannabis. He's a young kid, 24 years old. With him for almost a year now, and he's a fucking hard ass worker. Like, you tell him to do something, he doesn't fucking lollygag. He fucking goes and gets that shit done, right? And then he comes up and says, "What's next?" You know what I mean? You got to have people that bust ass. First of all, I was able to hire on a couple other people. Some of them didn't work out. I have another girl that works back in the garden, Summer. She was, what was she doing? She was waiting tables at a really high-end restaurant where she was dealing with people who didn't necessarily have the best manners. So she hated her job, but it paid well. But the thing was, she's super passionate about the plant, and she was just, ready to make a change. And she was willing to, give up, kind of more financial security. So I know how dedicated she's been. I've actually been able to increase everybody who's worked there, increase their pay rate several times, which is really good. We just want to make sure everybody's taken care of, and see, that's the thing, is I'm kind of the one that pushed a lot of this stuff, even though I'm not an owner. I just told the owners of the company, hey, we don't want to lose these people. You need these people. It was really hard for a long time because it was just us three, and we were literally doing everything. We were running a whole entire company. But since I've been able to bring my friend Hopper on board for sales, marketing, and he also does concentrates, and he's super legit, man. He made his first trip to Amsterdam in 1989, man, and he toured with Cottonmouth Kings as their road manager for 10 years. He works with some really legit people in cannabis, and I used to sell weed to him back in, like 2000, probably 2006, maybe 2006, 2006. No, I think it was 2008 when he had the Green Door. He had a shop, one of the first shops down in San Diego. So he's familiar with the business. I was able to get him on board, and he just makes connections with people. He came out like a month ago. He just won an award for his solventless called RHO. It's a solventless RSO. So also now there's more management. There's somebody who's like who's the inventory, track and trace, and then I was able to bring my girlfriend on as like the person to manage like the trim crew when they're doing things, and then we kind of keep people busy. Like if they're not doing something, I brought another kid on actually just recently too, young kid. He's really eager, and I have him transitioning. He's working with one of the guys for sales, and then he's also in the back, so he can learn the back end as well. So that way when he goes and talks to one of these dispensary owners or one of these, these managers of these dispensaries, he can go in there and have an intellectual conversation about what's going on as far as the cultivation side. And I think it gives him an advantage when he's talking about the product.
I definitely support cross training like that. And I just have to say, Brandon, that's a really cool story to hear. And I don't know if you saw in the post that I just made on Instagram, and anyone else who's listening, but I shared those seeds you shared with me. And, I'm just very proud of, I know I say it a lot, but it deserves to be said. I'm very proud of your rise in the cannabis industry. And it does come from that hard blood, sweat equity. And I think it takes a lot to like move all the way to a new place and start with a bunch of people, even people that you trust, and put a lot on the line like that. And
I'm excited to pop those, Spartan. Sorry to cut in. As Spartan has held up the seeds, and I wanted to say, echo that, because Brandon, having met you here in San Diego a few years back and smoked with you a few times, it's cool to see you transition to a different state. Everyone thinks of like California as like the cannabis gold rush state and like the center of cannabis, but Oklahoma really boomed, and I think you went at the perfect time. And it was really awesome to see how much success you've had and are continuing to have. And I look forward to seeing the future there. One thing I wanted to bring up is Rasta Jeff, Colorado cultivator and breeder of Irie Genetics. He has mentioned on his podcast that he incentivizes a lot of his growers with bonuses or other incentives like that. So if they have a really good crop, they get like X amount of dollars more at the end of the crop and things like that. So that's something I want to consider when we're hiring people on, because some of the best companies I've seen outside the cannabis space tend to have employee equity. So they're usually smaller businesses, but even like some of the larger ones that are really successful now give their employees stock. They give their employees good health insurance and other benefits to make them want to stay and work there. And it's counterintuitive because it costs the company a lot of money to do those types of things, but oftentimes they end up making more money because they have healthier, happier employees. So they have less other extraneous costs and like people, taking time off work or needing medical expenses for poor health complications like stress and eating poorly, where if you provide a lot of like fitness or healthy food options for them, that can be something that and I'm just talking about businesses in general, but if we can work that into our space in the cannabis industry and be sort of like, I think cannabis sort of walks a similar line as tech, in that there's a lot of tech in cannabis, and that we have a lot of like free thinking people that aren't necessarily like set in their old way, and we're progressing constantly. Like that's the other thing that I think about cannabis and tech being similar, and they've both grown so much in all of our lifetimes. We've seen the changes happen right before our eyes. So I'm excited to see how it continues to progress, because there's just so much opportunity in the space for everyone, really.
Yeah, I agree.
I just want to jump in real quick and tell you, Brandon, that I'm just super proud of you to say that I know you, and that I'm just happy to watch you. Every one of your victories is a victory for me too, dude. I got a little celebration over here because
I agree.
I like seeing growers. I like to see growers do well. It's usually the grower that gets shit on the most. So it makes me happy to see growers progress.
Completely
Yeah,
agree with
I
that
feel
sentiment
the
too.
same too. One of the things that really drives me and that I love to see is I love to see people succeed, even if it means taking a risk, right? Because there's always a risk reward factor, no matter if you're doing a home grow or you're doing your thing. Like you can take certain risks and they might end up being a reward for you at the end. And that's one of the cool things about cannabis. It's like you can ride these risks, and
Yeah.
sometimes you're gonna pay off and sometimes you crap out. But I feel the same way. I love seeing people succeed. I love shows like Shark Tank and like America's Got Talent. That shit drives me. To see other people like have the mentality of like, hey, I have the power to do something, and then put in the work to get it done. Right? Map out what you want, write it down, do all that. People, when they do that, I feel like connected to them more. Like we're on the same wavelength, like we're vibing on the same space.
Yeah, you have to have a certain appreciation, I think, and I feel like that's where it comes from, that sort of entrepreneurial zeal and like perspective that allows you to go about things in a way that allows you to succeed in that independent way. And
Speaking of success, I want to shout out Dr. MJ. Coco for Cannabis just hit 10,000
Yeah.
subscribers on YouTube. Holy shit.
That's
It was
true.
quick, and you make great content. You deserve it 100%. I love your website and the content you're putting on YouTube. So, Doc, I just wanted to give you a chance to sort of relish the accomplishments and maybe give some shout outs to the people in the community that made that happen, because damn, it's awesome. Talking about celebrating successes, I'm really happy to see your website continue to grow, and the YouTube as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm excited about both of them. YouTube's been going great. The community's grown a lot. We're expecting to have well over 500 people sign up for the New Year's Grow Challenge, which is going to be a lot of fun. My new videos are doing really well. The video I launched last week is actually just past 11,000 views in its first week. So I'm happy with that progress, and I really appreciate the support of all of this community. It tagged all of you guys because I really appreciate all your support and collaboration, and it's coming on and doing shows like this that really sort of grow that audience and grow that community. So thanks to all of you guys for collaborating, doing this show together, and let's keep growing together. Thank you, Jack.
No problem, man. It's I think we don't do enough of shouting out people while they're here and alive with us. I know we mentioned that a little bit with Rob, with his passing recently. It really makes you realize that even if he's not like he was the youngest guy in the whole world, but like we can lose people way too early, and you never know. You really never fucking know when your final day is going to be. So I don't try to take anything for granted. I love coming here and doing this every single week, but next week's not guaranteed for any of us. As grim as that might sound, I think it can be looked at optimistically too. It's like, take advantage of your day right now. Do something you love. I personally love doing this every week. That's why I keep showing up. I really like spending time and hanging out with you guys. I learn something every single week. I listen back just to read the chat because I can't always keep up with it while I'm here on the show. But like on a night like tonight where there's a smaller group with us, it's nice to be able to go through and answer some of the questions and kind of chat back and forth. We haven't gotten a ton of questions. I think sometimes the people here have already gotten to that point where they've like dialed in their grow for the most part, and they're just coming for like the entertainment and the community and the chill and the hangout. So there's something
one thing
cool
in
to that.
Sungrown, he just said he brought up a pretty sweet sounding thing. He said next year, I'm assuming outdoor, but next year he's growing donut-shaped plants. He saw a documentary on either mango or papaya farming, and the new method they use is to trim the trees into a donut shape as far as the foliage goes.
Oh, okay. So like a
Metal.
forest, kind of. So
Yeah,
like
so
maybe you can get some
lighting
light in the
inside.
center.
Yeah, for that lighting in the middle.
Hey, I got a question for you guys. I know you guys mentioned this is something for the cheap home grow community as well. You guys were talking about breeding and sex testing. What is your guys' go-to like test place? Do you guys know of if there's more than just one? I always use Farmer Freeman.
That's who I use too, but there's Delta Leaf Labs. Fuck Phylos, don't use them, but Steep Hill Labs here. There's a few other ones. If you Google cannabis sex testing, there's a bunch. I like Farmer Freeman, and here's why. He is a grower first and foremost. Like Spartan said earlier, I like to support people that are growers. Secondly, his prices aren't much more expensive. They might be the exact same as all the other people in the competition that I've found. And I don't know, he's just been doing it for a long time, and I've gotten 100% accurate results every single time. And the last thing I want to say is he gives you these stakes that go into your plant when you cut the leaf sample that has a number on it already, so you don't have to write anything down. You literally get like 10 envelopes, take 10 little leaf cuts, drop them in the envelope. You don't have to do a smash card or anything. Brandon's holding them up right there.
Okay, so
and
this is what it looks like.
Yeah, a few days later, after you send in those things through the mail, which is legal to do, you got your ID number right there, and then he sends you back an email, and it says like number 10, 11, 12 are female, and 13 through 15 are male or whatever. And then you can go through and separate as early as the cotyledon, the first.
Do you have him?
leaves.
Do you have him highlighted?
I don't. I'll do that now. Good thinking, Matthew.
This is a really great way to for home growers to be able to pop more seeds and not have, because a lot of times you can only maybe do 6 or 12 plants, but you don't know what you're going to get. So this can help you eliminate that hassle if you're just trying to grow for flower.
Yeah,
I'm super surprised you don't do that yourself, honestly. I'm surprised you don't have a machine already to do that.
I actually have a PCR machine at work. I just haven't been trained to use it. And I just, I watched some YouTube videos and stuff, and I think I could figure it out, but I just don't know what supplies I actually need.
Did you see the one from Vader from Ocean Grown?
I haven't.
Check him out. He hasn't had a whole lot of videos. I think he stopped making videos, but look up Vader OG on YouTube. He did a whole video on a PCR machine, a mini PCR, and he walks you through the whole process.
That's actually how Farmer Freeman started, with a cheap little, like, you could hold it in your hand PCR, and he learned how to figure out what code was identified as male and female, and like I haven't seen the Vader OG video, but it's something you can do at home.
I've got a 108 slot. I can do 108 slots at once.
There's a mini PCR out there that I think can be also used, and I think also medicinal genomics as well has like the pathoseq. Well, that's for something else, those are pathogens, but I think they have sex testing resources,
They do have sex testing at Medicinal Genomics.
Yeah.
Shout out to Kevin McKernan. He's a really good guy just for a fuck ton of reasons in the cannabis community. He's trying to like break some of the copyrights that are broad reaching. He's also like identifying stuff kind of like how Phylos was, but not trying to steal it. He's like keeping it in an open source, public, actual thing that everyone has access to. And you can go through a few different labeling methods with him where you can like either make it open to the public or private and you own the file type thing. So Medicinal Genomics is doing good work over there for sure. But yeah, like I said, Brandon could probably do it
He's
himself
also
'cause he has
doing
a
virus
PCR.
testing for like Lisch sclerosis virus and B. curlytop virus in cannabis, and I think also cannabis cryptic virus. So just another big thing. I know that'll become a more important thing, and he might also be doing phytoplasmas in the future.
He's
So
also testing for COVID on the actual
Yes,
cannabis to make
that's
sure that
right.
no one gets COVID from their cannabis, like making sure that the flower itself doesn't carry COVID. Like he's testing a bunch of samples to make sure. And he's really ahead of the game because like he's trying to look out for shit that could get us shut down that most people aren't even thinking about. So
I
he's really
agree.
awesome person.
Read some research papers with his name on it.
Yeah, as far as genomicists go, I feel like he's really great at explaining. Like one of my favorite one of my favorite examples he gives was like, why is it important that you do genomic sequencing and not just like morphological tests with like microbes, really any animal? And he shows a picture of a caterpillar and a picture of a butterfly, and he's like, these have the same genome, but obviously they're expressed very differently. And you have to go into the transcriptome and other aspects of that whole process, or all those facets, I should say. But I don't know, that always like I always thought that was a really great example because it puts it so bluntly.
For anyone who's listening to the podcast after, Spartan Grown shared the link to the Vader video, the part 1 video of how he uses the PCR to do at-home sex testing for his cannabis. It looks like Brandon already has a giant sleeve full of sex tests that he pre-purchased, so maybe not worth doing until you run through all of those. But in the meantime, it's definitely
Dude,
nice to have.
This will be done on tomorrow.
Damn.
Like
500 of them.
I love it, man. I pop 25 seeds to get 3 females. I take the best 3 ladies, but if I was to pop 25 seeds, I don't have anywhere near the space to veg them all out in large enough pots, so I can immediately kill off all the males if I'm not going to be breeding with them, and that saves you half your space right there. I think you can. I usually send them in like 2 or 3 weeks old, and that's like 5 weeks earlier than you're gonna. Like week 6 to 8, plants will start to show sex, depending on some stuff. It's really really hard to show. So knowing early is like you're saving money on light, on nutrients, on space, on effort training it, transplanting it, all that other stuff. So if you have the money to invest up front, I do think it is a time and money saver long term. So shout out to sex testing in general.
Interestingly enough, the cannabis community purchased these so I could continue my work. So I have to give credit where credit's due. The people who follow what I do, who are interested, allowed me to do this so I can do a bigger hunt, so I can go and pick out awesome things, and so I can give them to the community. So it's really interesting because my goal was to I don't normally do seed lines, but I needed income so I could do this, and I had so much positive response that it allowed me to go and purchase these so that I can do what I'm about to do.
Nice.
It's always nice to have a means to an end, route to what you're trying to get accomplished. And I think especially because you're doing work that a lot of people are interested in, there's no shame in putting it out there to the community and being reimbursed fairly for it. It's not like you're.
It's very democratic because they chose you, Brandon, in a way.
Not even just in a way. There's thousands of people they could have chose. There's thousands of people making seeds now. So it's like they chose you specifically out of a sea of people that they could have gotten something from.
That's just good karma. So that's just positive vibes going towards the project. So that's just even better, in my opinion.
Yeah, it works out real well. So I've got some home growth stuff that I've got going on. What do you guys? Are you guys running little dehues in your small tents to help control humidity at night? Are you guys exhausting your tents at night for humidity? How do you guys deal with the cooler temperatures at night and the excess humidity?
So I could take that easy for Southern California at least. I run my lights on during nighttime. So the temperature that I'm drawing in from like the outside air, it's easy to keep at ideal temperature in the tent. So that's simple enough. But during the daytime, like actual real life daytime when the sun is out, my house gets heated up by the sun. And that means at nighttime, my temperature doesn't drop drastically for the plants. Like when the lights go off, it's daytime. So they stay relatively close to the temperature that they would be in their lights on. So I don't have a huge swing. As far as relative humidity, I use just the exhaust and intake and lots of air movement inside the tent as well. It doesn't tend to get higher than like 65 at the highest RH. And at higher temps, I think that's actually perfectly safe and appropriate. I haven't had any mold or mildew issues yet. Knock on glass, save your ass, right? But anybody else have thoughts on regulating temperature and humidity, or mostly humidity? I think Brandon was concerned about with growing in a tent at home.
Yeah, so a tent specifically. So my tent, I actually just use that for my mom's and my autoflowers. So it's not a high priority really, except for mom's are, I guess. But so I have that in a big open space in my basement, and up here in Michigan right now, where it's the fall, it's dry. The ambient humidity, we'll say, is low, and the temperature is low. So usually what I have to do, I have an intake fan. I just intake from the basement air, the ambient basement air. And I have an outtake that I don't even really ever use. It never gets too warm in there unless I'm running in the summertime. And even then, it only goes on very rarely. It's just enough it brings in enough cool air from the outside or from the basement where it's at. I put it in the coolest corner of the basement too. And it seems to be that cool air is always dry. So that takes care of my humidity for that air coming in.
A tip that I heard from Eagle Gardens, I actually used it in my first tent grow before I had proper ventilation. I didn't have an intake fan, and that was enough to make my RH go too high. I used damp rid, these little buckets that have like a salt-based thing, I think, in there, and it basically like melts into a liquid. And that's a way to use lower the relative humidity without running any dehumidification that would cost electricity. So in his case, he likes that because he's not increasing the heat in the room from running a dehu, and he's also not running electricity. And they're affordable. He said that they last him really long. In his space, he uses like a bucket per tent. But I wanted to pass it over to Doc because I know you're also a person who's growing in a tent setup right now. Do you have any thoughts on running dehumidification, or how do you regulate your RH?
Yeah, well, dehumidification is tough if you are, I mean, it really depends on your setup. I only caught the end of that question. So if there is more to it than dehumidification in a tent, let me know if that's the essence of it though. Oftentimes you can use a long room when you're using a tent if you need to dehumidify a little bit. If you really need to dehumidify, though, the most success is by sealing up the space. That requires usually also air conditioning. So I try to avoid recommending dehumidification for new growers in particular. Try to set it up with adequate ventilation so that they can avoid doing that, and thinking about different ways to do intake, running temperatures and other stuff like that. But if dehumidification is really necessary, oftentimes it's necessary to jump in with both feet, not just one, and seal up the space, run AC, dehumidification, and carbon dioxide.
I do think it definitely depends on where you live. I feel very fortunate because where I live in Southern California, the temperature and relative humidity are so close to what's ideal for growing a plant most of the year that I have like a window fan on one side of my house it's very strong, but it has like three settings, like low, medium, and high. And just adjusting that, I treat my house like the long room. And I can change the leaf temperature in my room, like with the laser gun, to exactly what I want it by dialing that up or down, and then by doing the same thing with my exhaust on the tent. So how much cool air or warm air I'm drawing in from the
Yeah.
house into the tent, and it's like shockingly easy to adjust with where I'm at. Where some people live in like the desert in Arizona, and like the RH is always going to be super low. Or in Colorado, RH is always like nothing. So people call like a lot of their bud the Colorado crunch because it's so dry up there all the time. They're just fighting that constantly. So
Well, see,
regional.
I mean, I have a much drier humidity just up the road here, but I'm in the valley. So we have a much drier humidity than you do down closer to the coast. And I really think that the dry humidity makes it easy. I can always trap humidity for most of the grow, at least the plants put out enough of their own humidity. And the really dry air allows me to avoid dehumidification with sort of a relatively normal exhaust intake system. Um, so yeah, it absolutely depends on the climate where you're trying to grow. I think that dehumidification becomes really necessary if you're in really muggy, really humid climates where you really can't get either dry air or cold air. Definitely work with some growers that live in humid climates, but that can intake cold, humid air. Cold, humid air will have lower absolute humidity. And when it warms up in the grow space, they can actually manage their relative humidity that way, which is another route. But you need to have access to either cold air or dry air.
I can think of a place that definitely gets a lot of warm, humid air. It's Florida and Georgia. The times that I've spent in those two states, I feel for any grower there, because it's always really, not always, there's in Georgia specifically gets a little bit cooler, but most of the year it's super hot. And Florida in particular, it rains like crazy. So you'll get like super high RH. It feels like you're in an oven. It's like 100 degrees and 100% relative humidity outside. And that's just brutal. Like it's like that most of the summer and late fall. So anybody growing in Florida, hopefully you got good dehues and seal spaces.
Yeah, and so my advice with that, if you're struggling with the dehumidifier, is well, first of all, you really need an adequate dehumidifier. The little dehumidifiers that are available aren't going to do anybody any good. If you're struggling with the humidity problem, it usually requires a bigger sort of application for it. But a lot of growers I see are running dehumidifiers, but they're still running exhaust fans, and they're struggling with that situation for sort of obvious reasons. So you may need to take the next step and allow your dehumidifier to work. And the other thing is you can potentially set it up in a lung room. You got the heat issues with the dehumidifier though. So if you're in Florida, you're probably going to need both the dehumidifier and the air conditioner to have, a really sort of adequate grow climate.
Air conditioning kind of acts as a dehumidifier in certain clients, if I'm not mistaken, right? So like they'll have a little bit of a beneficial effect towards each other, maybe.
Yeah, they dry out the air. And it sometimes is enough, but I'm sort of envisioning a bigger problem for a grow.
Outlaw Cannabis and Nick M, because they're both saying that they're from Florida, so I won't use your full name because it seems like a real name. Both are talking about how they're in Florida. Like, yeah, we're in the swamps down here. We run the dehu all day and all night in Florida. I'm like, fuck yeah, you do, man. You ain't got no other option down there. Like, I lived there for 6 months when I was in grad school, and I don't miss it. I moved right back to Southern California. I'm fucking soft. I can't handle that heat, that humidity, and some of the
I've advised
people,
growers
most people are cooler.
Yeah, I've advised growers growing in Southeast Asia in monsoonal conditions, in really sort of maybe even a worse climate, but certainly as bad as Florida in terms of the heat and humidity. And they had no access to a dehumidifier. They had no access really to set up an air conditioner. They were trying to be stealthier about the operation, but still grow in kind of quantity.
Get the right strain.
Yeah, we went after strain. We went after training techniques, thinking about making sure that you have an adequate airflow and really preventing the growth of the large buds, sort of training to prevent the growth of the largest buds where you're going to develop the biggest mold issues. So you can, I've had growers that have had pretty good success in really running too hot and too humid the whole way through the grow. But they were on top of it. So that's the other message. If you really can't afford the equipment, you can be careful about strains. Going after those Southeast Asian landrace strains is a good sort of call too for that purpose. And just staying on top of the plant and preventing it from getting dense and sort of keeping adequate airflow, all the rest of the things that you can do, you can skate through.
There's a good episode of, I can't think of the actual show. They go through a bunch of commercial cannabis facilities, and there's one called Sunday Goods, and there's a cultivator named it's like SJORD, Shord. But he's a cultivator in Arizona where they have monsoon season, and they have different cultivars for that season because it rains so heavily, and they literally like have to change what they're growing seasonally because even with dehumidification and like the best greenhouses money could build and buy, it does come down to running specific cultivars that can work within that range because they can only adjust it so much. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
And you can get past it. It's just that you're not going to be able to grow as much per square foot or per square meter. You're not going to hit the same sort of harvest benchmarks in those situations. But, if that's your situation, you can get to a successful harvest. I think sometimes the way we approach talking about climate lends growers to the sort of belief that, they need to be at 82 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever. I mean, that's the ideal. And depending on sort of how much money you can throw at equipment and what climate you're starting with and all the rest of these things, sometimes you need to adapt to less than ideal conditions. And it's possible to adapt to less than ideal conditions. There are compromises to be made sometimes, but I wouldn't encourage growers to think that they necessarily have to save up for that dehumidifier and the air conditioner before they can start growing in someplace like Florida.
And I think a lot of people can run a lot hotter and more humid than they think. At least I know when I first started cultivating, a lot of the books and websites would say things like, you need to run at 75 degrees and 40% RH or you're going to get mold no matter what. So I'm like, oh, fuck. Well, that's like pretty cool and dry, which a lot of people I think still target those ranges. And so if we look at somebody like the Jungle Boys, they're called the Jungle Boys because their grow rooms feel like a jungle. It's like really hot and really humid. So they follow that VPD kind of chart on the higher temperature side, which is relatively high RH. And there's another cultivator, I can't think of his name right now, but he ran like 30,000 watt rooms on YouTube. I think Medicropper. And he talked about his best rooms were always when it was the hottest and most humid. And he was always really worried, but they performed super well. So there's definitely a fine line, and getting a little bit more warm and a little higher RH can work for a lot of people with a lot of cultivars, but I think a lot of us have been conditioned to run it a little bit cooler and drier to keep it in a safe space for good reason, because we want to avoid those cultivars that do have sensitivity. So it's definitely an interesting topic of conversation for me, especially.
Yeah, I really reiterate that. I think you can get away with running hotter and wetter or even colder and sort of drier. And then you can also really fine tune and dial things in for sort of the best quality and the best quantity production, the highest yield. It depends on what you're going after. And I think that that's an important point. I'm glad we kind of made that point, especially for sort of the cheap home grow theme here, that, yeah, if you're in Florida, the best setup is to get a dehumidifier and an air conditioner. But if you're a new grower starting off, there are other ways to sort of approach this. But it also requires, where you don't have equipment, you may need education.
Yeah, well, the way I handle the humidity and temperature. So when the temperature fluctuates, that's when it's really bad. So basically, I have 2 tents in one room, and they almost take up the entire room. There's like a foot of walk space. And when one goes off, the other one goes on. So it relatively keeps everything in check. And the exhaust fan is always on. And the other tent I had, when I went into veg, I unplugged the charcoal filter once to save electricity. But that wasn't a wise decision, I found out quickly. And yeah, if you keep the air flowing, it's way better and should have less problems in general. So yeah, I leave the exhaust fans on constantly in all the tents.
I'm in that same situation because I run my tents closed. I see some people like Eagle Gardens. He runs his tent open, at least for like the first half an hour after lights go out, to allow the plants to transpire and dump a lot of that RH. And then once they're done doing that, or at least a majority of that, then he'll seal it up for the dark period. But he runs them with the light. When the light's on, he keeps the door open. Spartan Grunt, what were you showing off over there? Sorry, I was jibba jabbing.
Oh, I was showing Smart Poker in chat, wanted to see Nugget Mac one, so I just brought the whole jar.
Nice.
By the way, Brandon got dropped for bad weather in Oklahoma, I believe. So
Yes, that's why I was kind of like looking down and not responding to anything. Just a second ago, I was looking over at the DMs. Sync Angel Matthew thankfully tagged me so I could see our Cheap Home Grow live stream panel group where Brandon says, I got dropped, weather is getting bad, can't get in, call, kept getting dropped. So sorry, Brandon. Sorry to hear about the connection issues. Spartan Grown, I got you spotlighted now, I believe, so they can see that Mac one. Hopefully it'll focus for us there. I know that the Michigan Bros Grow Show have been talking about getting you a new camera. So
Oh yeah, I haven't got that yet.
We'll benefit from that as well, I'd imagine, because once you get set up, you'll be using it for all the shows. See HD Spartans.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, because I really would like to show you up in HD because this is my favorite bud. I talk about it all the time. I know I'm a fanboy for the Mac, but really is she's a beautiful plant. I love her.
Go ahead and describe her a little bit more because I'm actually on the opposite side of the fence on this one. I've tried 6 different samples of the Mac and I've been disappointed every single time, including the one that I got from Capulator through one other source. Like Cap gave it to a guy and that guy gave it to me, and everybody seems to love it. So I want to know what's so special about it. What do you really like about it, Spartan?
Well, I don't love growing it, but other than that, I love everything. For one, it was a challenge to grow. I love unlocking challenges. That's one. I'm getting better. That's super fun. 2, I love the smells and the effects that I get from it. The effect, like the medicinal effect, like my tool in the toolbox, that's for sleep. or relaxation. It's super good for me for relaxation. And then the taste, for me, I love the taste so much that I often use it in my salads just to punch up the flavor. I don't like to use a lot of it because it'll make me too tired if I'm using, during the day.
What taste notes are you getting predominantly? Like anything?
Mostly the berry. Mostly I love the berry taste. And it's not, I can't put my finger on, like, it's not a specific berry. It's a mix of them. It's weird. And it's normally with berry kind of weed, you get almost sickly sweetness, like cookies almost. It's so sweet. You don't get the sweetness. So it's, you get berry and then you get like the, people call it earthy a lot or weed or dank. It's like that musky, whatever flavor in the back. But I really am in love with the berry. And I even got that in synthetically too. I even got that from when we grew it at Mechanical the first round. We only grew 1 round of it, but.
Is it more sour? Because you're saying it's not sweet on the berry. It's not sour then. So it's just like a more like what I would imagine kind of like a sangria or like certain wines that are like not sweet but not sour, but it's just like a cocktail of fruit that kind of all hits the notes.
I'm not a drinker, dude. I don't know.
It's all right. I'm just thinking that out loud here because I know a lot of those fruit combinations.
To me, it's almost like an artificial berry because you can't single it out. You can't say, yeah, that's blueberry, or yeah, that's raspberry, or yeah, it's just like a mix of it, but it's like an artificial, like almost like a candy blueberry thing. But there's not a lot of sweetness that I get with it. And I don't get like the doughiness like of a cookie, so I don't get that, which kind of surprised me. I get the more like that's when at the end and the exhale and stuff, that's when that weed, that old school dankiness just comes through, and it's that earthy, we'll say, or whatever. And then the effect is just wonderful. But like at the beginning of the show, I was smoking my snow cane. That's more of a speedy, racy kind of a weed. And then I just switched to this, and I even mentioned it in chat. I was like, man, I don't care. Judge me. I love the Mac 1. And the first toke of it, I was like smacking my lips, just like, oh, so good. So Yeah, I'm just in love with the strain.
I'm glad that you're getting what you want out of it. I hope to try yours when I come to Michigan because I'm confident it'll probably be better than any of the samples that I've tried out here in California, unfortunately.
But that would be a fucking tall order if it's better than Caps. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he didn't have a good run, or maybe he's like over, because it was like a month or two ago, and it's been quite a while since the Mac has been hyped for him. At least like it was over a year ago that it dropped, and I know he's
Yeah.
like kind of pissed off because a lot of people are selling it now, and the whole entire purpose of it was like give it to
Yeah.
a grower you respect, don't sell it to anybody, like give it to someone you respect. And so when that stops happening, and people are selling cuts for thousands, or even just selling it commercially at a any dispensary or clone nursery, then everybody can have access to it. And then the whole point of what he was doing was to like keep.
You cut out. We're gonna get the accordion.
Yeah. Shout out to Extract.
In quote good growers' hands. The
There
grower
he
that
is.
will do it.
Oh, there he is. He's back. You were gone, Jack.
No, I'm sorry about that.
Compressed.
And then he came all back at once again. But I wanted to shout out Extract 58. He said that I think that he'd like, he said that, I'm reading it to myself, sorry. He thinks I would like frosted cherry cookies from Relentless Genetics. I'll have to check that out because I've got a connection there, so that's cool.
Sorry, my connection cut out. But,
Mama Los 710 in the chat says that Moore, Oklahoma is the most deadly tornado location in the United States of America. Dang.
isn't Oklahoma known as like Tornado Alley or like?
It's right in the middle of Tornado Alley. Yeah, no, it's definitely, there's some interesting weather down there. I mean, and Brandon just cut out because of weather.
That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the
There's no place
thunderstorms
like
that roll
home.
up in the plains in Oklahoma and Kansas, those are crazy. I've been through some pretty nasty thunderstorms out there. I agree with Mama Lois. I'd be scared of building greenhouses, but
Facebook reminded me today actually that on my way up to Encinitas early in the morning, about 4 or 5 years ago, I captured footage of a bunch of lightning strikes in the kind of like arid desert north of San Diego anyways. And I was pretty surprised at that too. So
I was in San Marcos at that time. I remember about 2015-ish. That would be right.
yeah, something like that.
You
It's so
sure it
rare
wasn't?
here that we get any lightning or like hard storms that actually like have thunder and lightning. We get that sunshine all the time almost.
Direct energy weapon practice.
People are saying
they are
that,
putting
man.
they are trying to put lasers on strikers and also on our various carriers and destroyers and things like that, and shoot down drones. And actually I just saw a video about a new kind of like flak shell cannon coming out for that. And because I don't want to go on a tangent on something like this, but basically they're defeating the question of what if you put a ton of missiles out on one single target just to make sure that you sink it? How do you make sure that doesn't happen? And I guess the answer is, well, you got to put more things into the air than there are things that are going to hit you, which is hard to achieve. So lasers
Before
are
we get
another way
super
to do
off topic, I want to give Spartan Grown a chance to give his sign outs because I know you got about 15 minutes till the Michigan Bros Grow Show. So I just wanted to make sure we don't get you all rushed. And go ahead,
Yeah,
Spartan.
let me jump out of here. Sorry to laugh at you, Mike Denver, dude. I was keeping a straight face into the little emote with the that you left behind you. His hoop house blew over, and as soon as I saw the emote I just couldn't stop laughing. It's hilarious, dude. Sorry, bro. But everybody out, growers love to everybody. It was awesome hanging out. I had a great time. Chat had me fucking laughing a few times. It's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
See you guys. Yeah, this one seemed like really interactive with chat. I liked it. So it was awesome hanging with you guys too. And yeah, catch me at the Michigan Bros Grow Show. I'm headed over there. I'll be there in like 15 minutes. So growers love everybody. Awesome hanging with you guys. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Spartan. And that's
Peace
Michigan
out, Spartan.
Grow Show starts at
Spartan.
6 p.m. on the West Coast, 9 p.m. if you're in Michigan or anywhere else on the East Coast. I wanted to go back a little bit to the whole, I think Tao brought up direct energy weapons. And in California in particular, especially with the wildfires, a stat that I don't hear brought up enough that I think everybody should look more into is here in California in 2018, Governor Jerry Brown proposed and passed legislation that cut the forest clearing budget from $52 million to $2 million. Since then, we've had the worst wildfires in California's recorded history. That also corresponds with some of the worst wildfires in Brazil and Australia and other parts of the world. So it might be likely related to global warming as well. But we did lose a $50 million portion of our budget that goes to clearing dead trees and forests throughout California. But I've seen some videos recently where I'm starting to wonder, like what Tao brought up. The first 15 times I heard people saying direct energy weapons, I was like, fuck that. Jerry Brown cut the budget by 50 million. That's the reason the fires are bad. And then like I've seen some more compelling videos recently that there may be some evidence of that. So I'd say look into it. Pull an Eddie Bravo. I won't go too deep down that rabbit hole before we close the show.
I wanted to mention about Oklahoma, and I remember watching Potent Ponics episode once where he was discussing how with hail and all the weather that they get, they really have to fortify their greenhouses. They put in special like coverings so that if it hailed, it wouldn't destroy their crops and their greenhouses. So that's a real issue in Oklahoma. Yeah.
Anywhere that it hails. I mean, hail is one of the full I think just posted. He's like, glad I pulled because it started hailing like the day after they harvested their crops. But hail can definitely be a total crop failure. That was one of the things that when the hemp farm bill went through and they started allowing people to insure hemp crops now, one of the major things that people get crop insurance for is hail. So if it comes and hails and kills all their crops, they get paid back X amount of dollars per what that plant would have harvested and produced, which is an interesting thing. Also, I don't hear talked about very much, but it's now available to us. And not that there's a ton of people out there providing hemp insurance, but it shows that we're moving towards a more legitimate industry that people can work in and with confidence.
Historically, from from a human, perspective, like I think agriculturally, that's a really important thing for society to do. For your growth and for maintaining secure food security and other kinds of security. So the fact that we do sort of pay that back, even though people are growing in a sort of dangerous area, is pretty important. Hopefully that doesn't get cut in the future either.
Yeah, I mean, farming is something that we all sort of rely on, and there's not as many people doing it as we might imagine or think, whether it's cannabis growing at gardening, farming, horticulture level, or even like the food that we eat on larger scales. I've heard some statistic that like most farmers are like above the age of 50 or 60 years old, and like only
the
like
median age is like 65.
Damn, that's really high. Median, and that means that there's like counting all the younger people. And I've heard that also only 1% of the world's population knows how to grow their own food, which I haven't done a ton of digging into verifying those statistics, but they both actually sound about accurate to me, at least here in the United States.
There's far more than 1% of the world's population are farmers. We're still at a much larger percentage in the 20s are actual farmers in the world. So
thanks for fact checking. I appreciate that because I
don't know
those things quoted.
I don't know the hard statistic, but it's somewhere in the 20s. You'll have inspired me. I'll look it up. Maybe I'll know it for next week.
Good information to have, because that would be 1 in 5 people is a farmer if it was 20%, and I just don't, based on the amount of people that I know in my life and living in a agricultural
even that we're just over 50% urban as a global population, or the urban population is the only portion of the population that's growing right now, and most of that's from migration from rural areas. But I mean, just using that math, you're going to think there's a lot more than 1% of the planet that knows how to grow their own food.
So the stat that I was remembering, it says farm and ranch families comprise less than 2% of the U.S. population.
Yeah,
in 40% of all food produced in the U.S. is eaten. Most of it's corn per acre, and then there's the rest of it is a lot of soybean. But
one thing about crop insurance, when you don't have crop insurance, what you end up with is concentration, because the other way to insure as farmers is just scale. So when smaller farmers fail because of crop loss, they sell out their farms to large corporate farms. And that's sort of what most, the social benefit of sort of helping to ensure that those farmer protection programs are often more about keeping family farms, or keeping smaller size farms, or keeping diversification of farms, allowing farm families to maintain control of their land, things like that. It's not necessarily that like that land wouldn't be used for farming anymore in most cases. It's just that it would shift in ownership and management style.
Speaking
That's
about,
a totally valid point. I really am glad that you brought that up, actually, because that's how we do ensure more small farmers in that way with that support.
in
Yeah.
reference to farms failing, I know we talked about this a little bit, but one of the other shows I was on recently, we were talking about the citrus culture industry. Um, it was
Yeah,
taking
it's really
a
screwed
giant
up by the
citrus
hormone
greening,
ingredient.
right?
Yeah, citrus greening by the citrus psyllid.
And now, didn't they figure out something in Florida recently, though, like a microbial or something to combat it? I thought I remembered you maybe posting something optimistic about that,
Two
Matthew.
optimistic things, actually, I'm super enthusiastic about. The first one was, yes, microbial, and I don't remember off the top of my head what it was. It might have been not just microbial, but maybe a compound that it produced. I have it on my Instagram for those who are interested, and you can look up the phytoplasma on the hashtag Liberabacter, which I'll put in the chat. But also they found, another group of researchers found that, like, I think it was a specific oak leaf exudate. They just literally like concentrated it and boiled it and like got the extract out, and they applied it to the plants, and they saw sort of detrimental effects towards the phytoplasma. The phytoplasma, for those who don't know, is just a special kind of bacteria that colonizes the phloem channels of the plant. And it causes in the case of citrus anyways, it causes the plant to sort of stunt and gnarl. It'll turn ripe fruit unripe. It almost sounds like a curse, like a literal hex, right? Like when I describe it this way. And there's no,
It
and
was horrible. I mean,
for a long time, there was no cure.
we were discussing whether it was going to be the end of Florida citriculture. I mean, it could have been a multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar industry that just died because we didn't have a solution until a few months ago. And
Yeah.
Raptor Grow, who was in the chat earlier, was who I was discussing this with. I think it was on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle. And he lives in Orange County in California. And he mentioned he didn't want to grow citrus because if, for example, he was a guy who got his plant sick with that and then it somehow spread, he would feel terrible because it's such a big part of California's industry. And I was saying, I remember there was some optimistic thing that came up semi recently. So I'm glad that you were able to give us an idea what to look for, and just knowledge that that's not going to be like a huge issue, because we're already going through a tough time with our economy in certain regards. So if the citrus industry died among all of it, that would be a huge catastrophe. I don't think people realize how much citrus is in so many different things. So I'm really happy to hear that they've come up with a good solution, and it's not like a heavy biochemical. It's like one's a microbial and the other one's a extract from a oak tree or something. So both great solutions in my opinion, if they can be made widely available for affordable, and I hope that's the case.
Phytelligence is also creating. I happen to remember more stock that's just more naturally resistant. But it was those other two treatments I was the most excited about. And yeah, I mean, and there's also phytoplasmas that affect hemp for that matter. And I already mentioned lead sclerosis virus and B. curlytop virus, which are newly documented in cannabis too, that have no solution really. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of scary, I think, because these viruses or these phytoplasmas can move from plant to plant, colonize a bunch of plants through their vector really quickly, and then suddenly you have a cash crop that is not viable at all, and that's just crushing. And it will probably have, without insurance, like Dr. MJ Coco says, negative repercussions for small time growers, which all small time, I don't mean to be so insulting, but you know what I mean, not large corporate agricultural
Smaller
groups.
scale.
Yeah. That is going to be a huge factor, as it already is in other agricultural pursuits. So
Oftentimes it's the small farmer who gets hit, or even just the person on the bottom of the totem pole takes the hit. Unfortunately, the bigger people can usually afford to take those hits and not really realize it as much. So with that being said, we got to do, as small gardeners, most of us cheap home growers, it's all on us for many of the people listening. So doing our due diligence, coming into shows like this each week and furthering our education so that we can avoid problems before we have them. I heard some other shows talking about spider mites and how it was such a difficult issue to deal with. And it's like, having dealt with them now a few times and dealt with them very successfully, it's not something that I fear. And people talk about, oh, you think that you got everything going good, and then something might spring up and fuck you over, and it can definitely. I mean, that happens to people all the time, and don't blame the people for when something gets them, like russet mites, maybe something they've never seen before. It comes and they get infested with that. But if you prepare before you get them, like I personally have just become a huge IPM nerd. I've got a lot of free time. My garden's doing fairly well, so if I don't have to spend time working on one thing or another, I'll spend it researching how to prevent problems in the future, which I think more people should be encouraged to do. Don't wait until you've got the problem to figure out how to fix it. Like if you've got free time and you're passionate about cannabis and you've gotten to a place where your growing is dialed in for the most part, definitely look into more stuff like IPM. And with that, I'll pass it over to Zenthanol to give his sign outs where you can find good IPM information, because we're coming up to the final hour.
Si vis pacem parabellum. In peace, or if you want peace, prepare for war, right? So on that note, integrated pest management is incredibly important. If you want to be preventative, proactive, or curative, no matter what you're interested in, I have information about that on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, and content on my Instagram at SyncAngel, as well as my Twitter at SyncAngel. Yeah, and if you're dealing with these problems, or if you haven't dealt with them before, you can contact me for help as a consultant. I'm very interested in helping people out, whether they're from a commercial perspective or even a residential one, because ultimately, the more people who have a good IPM strategy, the less the cannabis community in particular, or any agricultural group in particular, will have it going forward, because each one of us can be a vector, right? And so the less vectors we have, the more people who know their stuff with IPM, the less problems.
Absolutely. And the less product that goes around with really noxious chemical pesticides that can be absolutely harmful and were often used in the cannabis industry, I hate to admit it, before regulations. I mean, once regulations came around, we started seeing tons and tons of failures for mostly pesticides, unfortunately. And we've done not we personally, we weren't the ones doing it, but like the industry has done a little bit of a good job, I think, cleaning up its act. That's one of the beautiful things about regulation. I'm happy to see moving forward. It's not perfect, obviously, but it does provide some safety to the patients and the users. So I'm happy for that. Next up, we got Dr. MJ.
Hey, yeah, it was a fun episode. Thanks for bringing up my YouTube channel, Jack. So I'll invite everybody again to head on over and visit my YouTube channel, check out the Grow Light videos, my Grow Light physics video. And of course, join us for the New Year's Grow Challenge starting on January 1st. It is our New Year's Grow Challenge feast. We've divided up the teams by strains. We have the dessert group, the fruit group, the color group, the potluck group, the global cuisine group, and the misfits. Everybody's welcome. It's free to join. We've got great prizes lined up from Photon Tech, from Mars Hydro, and from AC Infinity. So head on over to cocoforcannabis.com/challenge and let's grow together. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, panel. Thank you, chat, and everybody. And I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, Doc. And I hope people do take advantage of that, because I know that your community is continuously growing. I remember a year ago, the New Year's Grow Challenge, the numbers were like in the 200s. So to hear it's in the 500s, and the one before that, it was like in the 100 maybe range. So see it doubling and doubling and doubling. You're moving in the right direction. It's going up and up and up. Your community is staying engaged. They're growing more and better cannabis every single grow. So I really encourage people to check out the Coco for Cannabis community. I've shared those links because I believe in them. I wouldn't share links to a website that I think has bad information. I really want people to be successful, and that's one that it's nice to keep in my back pocket, and I can just fucking bam, here you go. Great information. It's all right there for you if you choose to follow it. Most people are really successful with it. So Doc, thank you for sharing your recipe and the science and practice of growing cannabis, like you say all the time. It's good for people to have access to that, and many people have access to bro science and practice of growing cannabis. So I really appreciate you trying to put the best information forward that you can.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that.
So finally, we have the American one. Our panel has shrunk down. We lost Brandon earlier, so shout out to Brandon Rust. But Tao, give your final shout out.
Yeah, shout out to Brandon and Spartan and you, Jack. Thanks for hosting again. You're doing a great job. Shout out to the panel and everyone in chat. It's always good to be here and discussing cannabis and everything related. And everybody have a great week.
Absolutely. Do our best to have a great week in between these shows. I always have a good time. Like Eagle talks about, I almost feel guilty taking any credit for it because I just show up. You guys all have so much great information and knowledge to share. Oftentimes I'm just reading the chat, passing questions forward, and doing my hostly duties, but I enjoy sharing a little bit about myself and my own grows. If you want to find out more about that, you can find me at Jack Greenstock, like you see here on the page. I'm on Cannabis, the cannabis-friendly social media app, under that name. I'm on Instagram at Jack Greenstock, and you can also find me on Twitter, Jack_Greenstock. I got to shout out Twitter because I think they do some of the least amount of account deleting for a non-cannabis social media app. It's a mainstream one. There's a huge community over there. I'm doing personally, I'm trying to put a little bit more effort into developing my Twitter and being involved in that community because there's a lot of really cool people there as well. There's so many awesome communities. Thank you all for being part of this one. If you're listening live on that YouTube, make sure to leave us that thumbs up. It helps the Cheap Home grow and expand, get out to the people that need to hear it. And all the listeners, if you listen to the podcast, make sure to write a review. That helps us as well, helps more people find the podcast. And thank you just for showing up. That's really, if you don't want to go through the effort of doing any of that other stuff, just showing up and listening and being part of the community is what it's all about. And we all appreciate you. I know it's not just coming from me. That's all of us on the panel and even the rest of the people in the chat. You guys appreciate each other. It is a wonderful community that's built up. And with no further ado, thank you all for coming. Have a great evening. This is Jack Greenstock signing out.